The Liberal Party could be facing an uphill battle to repair its voter base, according to a damning post-election review which has just been published. Joining me now for more on this is Senior Politics Lecturer Dr Zareh Ghazarian. Thanks very much for your time. Look, I guess the big question here is how much is Scott Morrison and what he did and his unpopularity, and how much is this a systemic issue for the Liberal Party?
Good morning. It seems to be a bit of a mixed problem for the Liberal Party. Of course, the party structure is such that it gives a lot of power to the leader at the time. And we saw in 2019 that worked really well for the Liberal Party. Scott Morrison appeared to have a very presidential campaign and did really well to attract as many voters as the party possibly could, and came away with a win in 2019. But it was almost the complete opposite in 2022, where the party focused heavily on Mr Morrison as leader, and his popularity at the time had become much weaker, and that ultimately led to a very poor result. And the Liberal Party now is really scrambling to try and find options and alternatives, both in terms of its structure and personnel, to try and address the slide, because what happened at the national level happened even in a worse state in Victoria, and the party's really wanting to avoid that sort of performance in future.
Yeah, New South Wales is the next election, obviously, but federally, the big things that change, you mentioned Scott Morrison's popularity. It seemed there was a bit of a shift as well on viewers, I should say, I'm always thinking of the viewers, on voters' views on climate and the emergence of teal candidates as well. The last one perhaps gets the trickiest for the Liberal Party because they've got to try to win back those voters. I think they do anyway. They can't give up all of those seats while still trying to maybe make ground up on Labor in outer suburbs, and then there are national seats when you talk about the coalition. And it seems to be getting harder and harder to sort of broadcast rather than narrowcast.
It is. And one of the challenges that the Liberal Party has moving forward is that it has to do two key issues. First, it has to reconnect with traditional Liberal Party voters, especially in those inner metropolitan seats that the party has traditionally held and won, seats like Kooyong, Goldstein and others across the country. Secondly, they have to be able to have that broad policy agenda that can attract voters who are swing voters, who are not committed to either party, and will be looking up and weighing up the options presented to them by the major parties. The risk for the Liberal Party is that if it is now starting to focus on representing only small or specific policy issues, then it risks alienating or not attracting those other voters who are those swinging voters who are looking at what the options are presented by the parties, and will be voting based on those options. So it's going to be a very fine balance for Mr Dutton and the leadership team of the Liberal Party at the national level to try and get that balance right.
It's always interesting with Peter Dutton because most people that know him in this building and know him personally say self-deprecating, you know, really, really nice bloke to talk to, and the public perception is very different. That's obviously important. The leader still matters. How do you sort of manage that? Is it going to be a classic, let's go over summer, you could get maybe a new pair of glasses, the classic political makeover? Is it more policy driven? Where do you see that?
I suspect part of the problem for the Liberal Party has been its policy agenda, and it really has been unable to reconcile the challenges and the tensions between the more socially progressive Liberals and the more conservative, socially conservative members within its own party. And I think we look at the battles that the Liberal Party has had in the past, in the 1980s, for example, the division between the wets and the dries, the Howard era between 96 and 2007 sort of was able to manage those competing demands relatively effectively, arguably because Howard had gone through those challenges and seen the damage it causes to a party. But what the problem for the party is to remain or to be that broad church, to be able to attract members from all different sorts of political perspectives, but all united with that broad principle that the Liberal Party stands for. And I think that's going to be the big challenge, rather than makeovers and those specific sort of things that can happen for political leaders as time progresses.
Yeah, look, they're not the most important thing. I guess sometimes they matter. What about the issue with younger voters? The polling we've seen today just shows it's dire and getting worse. So the issue for the Liberal Party is how do you appeal to them? I wonder, this was put to me by one Liberal MP saying, well, look, we should be able to capture these people. We have very independent younger people nowadays. That's increasingly the case. The Liberal Party is about choice. It's about independence. Labor Party is, of course, about being lockstep on sort of opinions. So is that the upside for the Liberal Party? Yes, they need to modernise their message and maybe pivot on a couple of issues, but younger people might return to a Liberal brand if they emphasise that independent, free-minded element?
Well, I suspect that's the case. And a few points here, really. Young people, and we've done research on this, young people are just not a homogenous group. So they will be voting for different reasons and different issues that comes up from time to time. And I think therein lies an opportunity for the Liberal Party. It has been and is a pragmatic party. It can be a pragmatic party. In other words, it can respond to the mood of the electorate at any given time. And I think that is something that the party should use as its strength. And to be able to reflect the will of the community, the aspirations of the community in the sorts of policies that it is putting out there. If the party seems to be and wants to be more of an ideological party, then ultimately it goes back to that original discussion we were having, in that it starts to reduce its scope and it starts to reduce its potential pool of voters. And that is something the party just can't afford to do when its primary vote is slipping.
Dr. Zareh Ghazarian, interesting to get your thoughts. We'll have more coverage, of course, for our viewers this afternoon with that full report having just been released. Thank you.